Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show and got a great series of great interviews recently. We've had some great CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies. Take a look at the archives because there's some great episodes with Netflix and Kinko's and YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, all kinds of CEOs and founders, some interesting episodes there. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And first, a quick shout out to Trevor Keane of TK Health Services, who introduced me to today's guest. His name is David Bartholomeusz, and he is a serial entrepreneur. He spent a lifetime working in professional entertainment. He had a business that was in professional entertainment in the nightclub space, in DJing and emceeing. He also has done a lot of facilitation. And we're going to talk a lot about personal growth and some of the challenges that he's experienced. But first, before we get to that, of course, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media. If you want to learn more about how to start a podcast and to use it for content marketing, go to rise25.com and we will tell you all about it. All right, David, a pleasure to have you here today. And I want to start with your business was humming along. You had about 150 people that were working for you in different capacities. It was going really well. And then we were talking about it beforehand. It's almost like your own personal pandemic. You had this kind of freight train or train that was coming off the tracks that you could see happening. But it all started one day when you saw an employee using Grindr, which is an app. Well, I'll let you explain it because I'm probably going to butcher the explanation of it. But it was Grindr and Tinder, which are two apps that you saw. And when you saw that, you had a feeling that the days of your business were numbered, which is absolutely crazy. And that's what ended up happening. So tell us about that experience and how you could foresee that was going to hurt your business.
Yeah, it's really shocking. And it was many years ago. I was probably about 28 when that happened, which is, that's a good, nearly 20 years ago now. And this was just at the point where MySpace was becoming a thing of the past and things like Facebook was starting to proliferate. And I remember one of my team, he kept vanishing off. He kept going out of the office and he kept coming back. And we were in entertainment and it was fine for us to talk about these things. And we said, you keep vanishing and then coming back. And what are you doing? And he said, I'm going on mini dates. And we're like, okay, how's that happening? And he showed us, he went onto this website called Grindr. It was not an app then because people didn't have smartphones, but he showed us this website he was going on where he could meet other people in his area who were interested in, relationships or hookups or different things, whatever, you could it was a Craigslist of sex for gay men. And we were just fascinated by this. And he was showing us through it all because we were in the space of providing experiences for people to meet other people and build relationships and all these sorts of things. And the more he told me about it, the more this feeling that I was about to throw up started welling up inside my gut, because I went, well, this is all good and well because this is a specialist demographic. But if this becomes a mainstream thing, then the core foundation of what people use our events and entertainment business for, which is to, socialize and meet other people and get crazy, is going to be gone. And it was really the beginning of the end of that working model for the business, which was, really crushing for me. I had, by then nearly a couple of hundred staff and contractors working across Australia and a clubbing network of maybe 150,000 users, which doesn't seem like a lot now, but back in the days of MySpace, that was massive.
Yeah.
And it was death knocking on my door and saying, you can't be this way forever.
Wow. And there also was some legislation, I understand, that came down at the same time, which kind of changed the way that you could operate. So how did you react to this as it started to trickle down? Was it a kind of a slow effect where fewer and fewer people started showing up to the nightclubs?
One of the things I can say that I'm very proud of really in all of this was that I saw it coming from a long way off. Really, that's where I excel, is in strategy and alignment, of actually seeing the long term and thinking long term. And so, we saw that Grindr situation sort of 10 years before there was a problem. And then about sort of 5 years before there was a problem, Tinder came out, and then Tinder became an app. And when Tinder became an app, I went, okay, the business needs to move in this direction. We need to be very much a business that's related to the entertainment side of things. We really need to start becoming an entertainment business, not a social business. Social is all going on the internet. But then what happened was governments around Australia, because we were operating all around Australia, started changing their view of nightclubs and saying they're too dangerous. We don't want them. They're going to close, early, and they're just not going to be the same space. And so really the other side of my business was then marginalized. And so the government gave us about 3 years to adjust. I didn't adjust. I just started getting out at that point. And so I really had 3 years to wind it down. So it wasn't a dramatic exit, but it was a fall from grace.
In retrospect, would you do anything any differently?
I don't think I would have done the business any differently, but the mistake that I really think that I made in hindsight was I attached my persona to the business. And that was I made that mistake very early, and it was very easy to do because I was kind of like this nightclub boss. And it's very, very easy for my ego to attach to these sort of addictive ways of being. I really want to belong, and I really want to feel connected to other people. And as a professional entertainer, you get a lot of feedback back from people. And then as a guide of other entertainers, you end up in this, you really can create this persona of I am the puppet master. And I really let my ego
you have a lot
get
of power
attached
too.
to that.
You have a lot of power, right? I mean, like Kingmaker, let people in the club or not.
Yeah, not even that. It was beyond that. It was like, let people into the whole scene. Like I kind of owned the whole network, and I could, at that age, I sort of had the power to really. It wasn't so much the negative power; it was the positive power. This power to allow people who were outside or didn't have a social circle to find their people, and I really. I collapsed my identity with that identity. And so when that had to end, at a rational level, I was fine with winding down the business, but at an emotional level, I was absolutely, completely unprepared for the sense of dysphoria that I would experience when I was no longer able to show up as that persona in the community. It was awful.
It's gone. Before you did that, I'm looking over your background here, and you actually, I think it's different in Australia, but you got a graduate degree in law, studying law. I have a legal degree as well here in the United States. But you were doing this while you were running the entertainment business?
Yeah, I've just got a love of learning. And I think I was really just interested in understanding how businesses operate at a legal level, how government sees that, and how to be a congruent participant in the process of business. But the good thing that really came out of it was I met my wife at law school. And, just for that, my life has been made so wonderful.
And you still had the entertainment business after that, after you graduate and you have your degree. Was that part of the plan?
Yeah, and that business is still there, but it's a very, very different business now, and I'm not an owner of it.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about, your background. I know you had a lot of family trauma growing up as a kid. Talk a little bit about what that was like and how that influenced your career trajectory.
A lot of trauma there. I didn't really realize until I started unpacking it with people who are in a position of experience to gauge sort of what's a normal level of upset as you grow up. And I remember I read a book by Elaine Aron called The Highly Sensitive Person, and there's like a checklist of traumas, and I think there might be 15 on the list, and I ticked 13 of them, and that's when I thought maybe I'd actually need to go and talk to someone who actually knows what a normal growing up trajectory looks like. And I was actually shocked to find that, not everyone loses a sibling, and, not everyone experiences, different types of, I guess they call it abuse, different experiences that can be really confusing and confronting, and can make us, I guess, jump to assumptions or create rules for our life that just don't serve.
And tell to the extent you're comfortable talking about it, tell us about some of those experiences in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of the ones that I was just, talking about this with someone yesterday is, even so young as, I think I was 12 months old, I turned over accidentally, I believe, I don't really remember it well, I turned over my sister's bassinet. She was about 14 days old. And there was a big drama, and I was sent to, taken to my room and, put in my room, and she died that night. And it wasn't to do with me. She died. And but I made that mean somehow at a subconscious level that I'd killed her and I'd screwed up my family, and that everything bad that had happened in my family was actually because I had killed my sister and a whole bunch of things. And, it really, it really impacted me. But at the same time, I couldn't stop being me. When I was a little kid at primary school, I remember the other boys at the school, the older boys, told me that doing ballet was for poofters, I think was the word that they used at that time. And I disagreed. I thought that ballet was just a wonderful way to express what was going on in my body. And they gave me a few warnings, but then they took me aside, and I remember they rubbed my face on the side of a building until it bled. And I never felt like I belonged after that experience. And so, coming into high school, there was a rush to belong, and I just completely failed to meet that mark. And then I remember in my last year of high school, I somehow became the head prefect, so the school captain. And I was doing all these things to try and be of service in the school, and clearly some people disagreed. And I still remember this experience, which at the time I was laughing it off, but in hindsight, it's deeply traumatic. Some of the stronger students tied me up, and then they tied me there was a central sort of pole in the middle of the school, it was a basketball ring, but it could be seen by all of the classes around, sort of in a square. And they tied me to that pole and stripped my top half, and then poured rubbish bins of empty rubbish over me, and then wrapped me in toilet paper. And I was left to stand there through the whole of that lesson and the whole of lunch. And there were teachers walking past and laughing too. And I've been injured by those things, and I didn't really, until I started to unpack it, I didn't realize the extent to which that urge for me to belong is so strong, because I've had these experiences of trying to be me but still belong, and so often being not just rejected but traumatized for being me.
Yeah. How did you end up going into the entertainment business from that? Because you could see people, going the other direction, but to be the center of attention, and a performer, be in entertainment, it's kind of an interesting trajectory from someone who had experienced that kind of trauma.
Yeah. I think, for me, at my heart, I'm an explorer. I like to explore. And one of the places that you can explore forever and never map it all is inside. And I think that that's what really drove me as an entertainer, was this idea that there are stories that we can tell. And I discovered quite early that you could tell stories through music. And so becoming an entertainer in the world of music was really powerful for me because it allowed me to observe other people exploring these stories with me. And so, really, I think at heart, I'm not so much an entertainer as an explorer. And I like to guide people in these inner spaces, if that makes sense, help them go inside themselves through these stories. So when I'm telling a story, or I'm making a musical performance, or I'm mixing music, or any of those things, it's really out of a desire to invite someone else into a world so that they can explore that world for themselves and to be a helpful guide.
And you've done a lot of facilitation work also, which you've described as similar to the professional entertainment work that you've done. So explain to me the connection between those, how you see those similarities.
Yeah, well, to me, they're exactly the same thing, because really at a deeper level, what's driving me is the desire to be a worthy guide to other people, to say, this is a space that I'm familiar with. And the space is this, it's the internal space. It's the space inside. It's to say, it's actually, it's safe to go inside there. It's safe to explore. But if you would prefer to have someone walking alongside you that's familiar with the space, so that if you see something, you don't know if it's a problem or not, you can say, is that a problem? Or you can sort of gauge and feel comfortable to explore. And so for me, I think it's a thing that people naturally gravitate towards me for, is that I love taking people on journeys inside themselves, whether that's an EOS style, structural, here's a model, let's go and explore the leadership journey that's possible through that model. I don't really mind, what the model is, but it's really great to have a model that we can then use as the substrate to drive this internal exploration of, how can I show up in service for other people? How can I show up as a leader of leaders? How can I show up in the world in ways that are more authentic of my deeper or hidden self? And I guess, for me, that journey to rediscover those hidden parts of me is powerful for me. And so I guess naturally I want to make it available for other people as well, because of how powerful it's been for me.
It's funny, for someone who has sought to belong, there's one group of people that you don't want to belong to, and that's being a coach. Because we were talking beforehand about how you were describing what you do. And I said, well, it sounds like you're a coach. And you said, no. I think being a coach to someone, or saying you're a coach to someone, is offensive. So
yeah, and I'm not saying coaches are offensive. Yeah, but I'm getting activated already. Look, I'm upset.
I'm intending to trigger you just to get a reaction.
Yeah, I've been reactivated in this space, and I think being a coach is all good and well. This is not about being a coach. I don't feel like me being a coach is an authentic expression of who I am. And so for me, what I'm really concerned about with coaching is this idea that someone else will understand what's going on inside me better than I will. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And for me, because the motivation is always around the human insight, or it's not even the insight. It's not about getting anywhere. It's about this confidence and this desire to explore inside, to explore all of that internal space, and to really get those hidden beautiful parts of ourselves. In my experience, that doesn't come from an external expert coming in. An external expert is really, really great if I want to lift my profit percentage or some of those sorts of things. But I guess my discovery over time has been that a lot of those external desires to, have more money, or to, have a higher profit percentage, or to have a better business, or to have a better relationship, or, all of those things, if I am willing to go deeper, they are often desires attached to deeper drives to actually rediscover who I thought I could be, or probably more close to my heart, to discover the latent or the emerging possibility of how I can show up for other human beings in this moment, in the way that the world is going. For me, that's the thing that really drives me and makes me, when people say, can you coach me? I say, well, I can, but I won't. I just won't. I refuse to coach you because I'm only interested in creating experiences for other human beings that allow them to experience this internal space as a deeply safe and secure space for themselves, of which they are their own master. And when they can experience that, the joy that I experience in observing someone cross that threshold, that possibility that they could be their own master again, it's just too beautiful. I'm not willing to have someone make an extra $10 million and miss that trick.
And that's
because I did that. I made that money, but I missed that trick.
I mean, listening to you describe it here, I can't help but think that a part of that is grounded in your experiences as a child.
That that's the funny bit is that I'm externalizing all of those unmet needs onto other people in the end anyway. So
in a good way, right? In a good way,
it's in a way that's of service. But
you're being the guide that you needed.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's not fair for me to project that onto other people as well. I have to be careful of that and actually really show up in the moment and try to deeply understand what this person is driving at and what they need, what their needs are. Mm-hmm. Not to try and get them to somehow emulate the journey that I wish I could have taken, that I never got to take.
Does that mean that you need to have a personal connection to what they're going through? In other words, if the person you're working with has a need that you can't relate to, is it hard for you to, in your words, go on that journey with them?
Actually, it's easier because the more emotionally invested I get in their particular story, the more I get sucked into that story, because that's the thing that I've realized in my own life is that, I talk about, it's awful to have rotten rubbish dumped over you and be ridiculed and look at the teachers and wonder why they're not intervening. But actually, when I unpack that, that's all story about what happened. What happened is just what happened, and it happened in the past. That doesn't have to govern what my future looks like. It's actually open. It's an option for me at any time to say, reality is emerging in this moment, and I have such a capacity to show up in this moment of service to others as a fully expressed version of who I am right now. I don't need to actually go and repair all these traumas of the past and go and nurture my inner child. Yeah, that can be helpful to flesh it out and get some understanding of what's going on under the surface. But when I can show up authentically in the moment and just have capacity to be in the space of that emerging moment with another human being, that's when I'm being of maximal service and being most who I am in this moment. I actually learn more and make more progress in my life by showing up authentically in the moment for another human being than any amount of couch sitting and navel gazing. And so it's really interesting to, there's almost a bit of tough love in there for my inner child in that way, if that makes sense, to say, I'm really happy to provide a space for you inside to be whole and complete, but out here, what's most important for me is to maintain the rituals, the habits, the rhythms of a human being who can show up in the moment. Last night, I was up till midnight because I was so angry about an agreement that I've just seen, which says essentially, there was a persona that I was really interested in inhabiting. And I thought I could give these people some money and they would elevate me and give me this title. And it was a mistake. It was just a mistake. I was just looking to belong and I was willing to use money to try and belong. But when I read the agreement, I just went, this is not providing me with an authentic avenue to express who I am. This is restricting me and saying, you have to do this in this way. And so that deeper part of me was all upset and saying, just quietly, there's something wrong about this. It's not right. This is not right. And I only figured it out at about 12:15 last night, but I used, there's a thing called the Oxford Group, which all of the AA and all those things have sort of come from this Oxford methodology of sort of stepping out those defects inside myself that have kind of precipitated this upset and realizing sort of the assumption that I've made or the mistake that I've made inside myself or the story I've got going. that's causing me to behave like that. And what I realized was that grab onto this persona rather than just show up in authentic service of other human beings in terms of strategy and alignment, which is the stuff that I'm really, that I have so much capacity to show up for other people, whether it's people within my company group or other members of the community, when they come to me and say, I want to discover what's going on inside me that's in the way of creating a simple way of being of service to other people and being fully expressed in this business that I'm creating or in this not-for-profit that I'm creating or whatever it is that they're creating, this entity that they're creating. Often there's that dissonance that's going on where they see this opportunity, but there's that maybe that quieter voice inside saying, don't miss the growth opportunity for yourself in amongst the weeds of the day-to-day of that business that you're building. Use this business as substrate to discover a deeper expression of who you really are, that more beautiful part of yourself that might be hidden. And that's a different journey. That's an internal leadership and exploration journey.
Speaking of leadership, you said something that I thought was really insightful, reflecting on yourself earlier today when we were talking. You have spent so much time devoting, volunteering, spending a lot of time in different communities, especially in the entrepreneurs organization, volunteering in different capacities. But you said that, I think that I keep returning to roles in the path of leadership, meaning, different leadership roles, helping to guide different programs, because you want people to think I'm an authority, a leader, etc. A feeling of not belonging, but understanding. Reflect a little bit more on that.
Yeah, it's so crushing to look at how many leadership roles I've served in, and it's so interesting though that
it's about a page, by the way, of like a 6-point font, page and a half, 6-point font. It's insane.
These desperate attempts for people to feel like I'm an authority, and it's just it's so interesting to see how addicted I am, how caught I am in that cycle of wanting to have some sort of external validation that I am of use to other leaders. That, there's this saying that leaders create more leaders. And I want to have this external validation that other people think that I'm creating more leaders. But really, that's what I do every waking moment. I got in trouble with my wife this morning because she likes to make toasted sandwiches for our 7-year-old because it's a lovely thing to do. It's a lovely way to be of service. But I don't like her doing that because it stops our 7-year-old from making her own sandwiches. I want to lead the leader inside my 7-year-old, and my wife wants to nurture the 7-year-old. And so, we're at odds there. And, I was willing to get in the bad books with her and have her be a bit upset with me to defend that position of saying leading leaders is the thing that I do. And I can't do that when you're doing the things that she needs to do for her. And to see that, I guess, that deeper value inside myself. But it's been also so telling for me to see how many roles I've taken on, and I've turned that into an egoic grab at an identity. I want to be the chairman of the entrepreneurs organization, and I want everyone to see that I'm the leader of leaders. And there's a quiet voice inside me that consistently says, no, you're not a leader, you're an explorer. You don't want that, but you have this egoic desire for it. That's not your best path. And so I don't go there, but that voice, that ego, it doesn't go away. It says, I say, thanks for sharing, and it quietens down. And then at the very next opportunity, it jumps back in there because, there are these traumatic experiences that have made me create these rules of thumb that no longer serve me, which is, you need to be useful, and other people need to know that you're useful, and they need to understand how the tribe can't survive without you. Otherwise, they'll cast you out because you're weird.
Otherwise, they'll tie you up to a pole.
Exactly. I've got lots of evidence there that says, just being the best leader that they've ever had is not enough. You'll also need to conform to their expectations of you. Otherwise, you will be marginalized and ridiculed and maligned and cast aside. That's my main fear.
It's amazing how maybe amazing isn't the right word, but you're so conscious of it, and yet it still is a tension for you. This tension between being an explorer and wanting to be a leader to get that external validation.
But that's a healthy relationship with a part of me that's designed to keep me alive. You know, especially here in Australia, there, you know, other than the redbacks and the snakes, there's actually I'm not ever really in any real danger here. You know, it's a very protective social environment here. And so my ego is kind of like this thing that, you know, really, other than stopping me from crossing the road while checking my phone, it doesn't really have that much of a role, but it's still there and it still has a part to play. And, you know, I thank it every day, because also, you know, this morning I had that conversation with my wife and I risked our friendship to stand up for a value of mine, which is empowerment. You know, for me, that value of, you know, we exist for each other, to empower each other, to help each other discover who we can be. That's a really deep value for me. And if my ego wasn't there, I wouldn't have, you know, taken a stand for my 7-year-old being a leader in her own life.
That's a great
lesson. So
lesson.
it's there for a purpose.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. David, this has been great. I want to wrap things up. I know we're short on time. I want to wrap things up. Last question. I'm a big fan of gratitude. So, you know, if you look around at your peers and contemporaries, however you want to define that, perhaps others in your industry, perhaps others you know through the EO community, who do you respect? Who do you admire that's doing good work these days?
The first person that comes to mind is the goddess of governance, my wife, David Bartholomeusz. You know, she completes me in a way that I could never have picked. And every year I learn more of why they said on our wedding day, we hope today is the day that you love each other the least, because she's so willing to take a stand for her values, and it empowers me to do the same. And, you know, she's got this podcast where she talks to people about purpose higher than profit. And I consistently see her do that in her own life. And it's just, it keeps me grounded. It keeps my ego where it belongs, and keeps bringing me back to that natural part of myself, that part that has capacity to show up as my best self for other people. So I'm really grateful to have her. We take walks in the evening, and those walks are the highlight of my day. The second person is a man who really showed up for me at a point in my life where I was starting to understand that I was not a leader of leaders, that I was a guide, an internal guide. And he really helped me to see that. His name is Brian Bro. He was, I think, the global chairman. He was global chairman of EO. And he was the director of the learning committees when I was sort of just first coming into the global committees. And I just showed up so terribly in about the first 24 months. I was just so, my ego was all out there, just going, this is an opportunity for me to build, you know, respect amongst my peers. And I was so activated in all of that. And I was just yelling and bouncing off the walls. And he never, ever told me off. He just modeled this patient, authentic human being showing up in the space of service for other human beings. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about how much self-confidence it takes to trust that your modeling of behavior is noticed by the deeper part of another human being. Because for me, it became the model by which I operated after that, once I made the realization for myself. The other person I really like to shout out to is one of my forum mates. He's just been in my forum for a long time, and he's very different to me. His name is Toby Strong, and he has just consistently shown up as his authentic self in forum. And so I've been able to discover so many things I don't know about myself, because he can take me to a part of a space inside me that I don't even know exists, because he's just so different to me. And he's got such a direct way of bringing me into his world. He does it every 30 days. He brings me into his world. And by doing that, he shows up exactly the way that I want to show up for other human beings in every moment, which is to inspire and empower them to come into a world and discover how they are in that world and to be able to explore that world safely. So for me, he is the model of who I want to be in every moment, in every moment that he does that for me.
That's great. David, thank you so much for your time. Where can people go to learn more about you and connect with you and reach out if they have questions?
I think if my name is on the top of this podcast, David Bartholomeusz, you can just email me at gmail.com. It's just my full name, davidbartholomeusz@gmail.com, or link with me on LinkedIn or Facebook or any of those social mediums. I think one of the things for me is I'm an explorer, and so I don't have these sort of, I guess I don't have these productized ways of experiencing my journey, if that makes sense. But I use all these different existing frameworks to help people experience journeys with me together. And so really, I think if people just reach out to me and tell me authentically who they are, then I can then immediately sort of stand beside them and enjoy the journey with them. It's one of the things that makes EO so dear to me, is that I feel like I get to do that with everyone in EO in every moment I'm with them.
That's great. David, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.